welcome to EdTALK Coffee. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by Corinne Martin. Corinne is a creative leader, an educator, and a researcher as well, who sits in the intersection between pedagogy, uh, creativity, art, as well as emerging technology. And I think you have a very rich cultural background. You have worked in different systems. So, welcome to EdTALK Coffee.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Indeed. So I'm multicultural. I'm originally from Lebanon. Grew up in Houston, was born in France. So I hold a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Graphic Communications from the University of Houston, a Master's of Education from the American University of Dubai, and I'm currently completing my doctorate in education at Edgewood University. So indeed, my area of interest is the cross-section of education, art, and new technologies. So we can talk more about that.
Indeed, and this is very unique, to be honest. Bringing art into the discussion of pedagogy and technology. This is something I'm really interested to hear more about, and even to share with the audience, because we always had this mindset around art that it's something that happens in a classroom where students are drawing and doing something and present to the teacher, where indeed there is beyond behind that. But before we jump into the discussion around art and pedagogy, I'm really interested to know more about this journey, which has a totally different, diverse culture and systems from USA to KSA to UAE. What was the most exciting part and the most challenging part in this journey?
Yeah. So the exciting part is I've always been very drawn to coming back to my roots. So that was really wonderful to be able to achieve, to be able to share with the world what is out of art, what is design in the Middle East, all the wonderful things that we have to say, all the things that we've been through, our culture. And somehow I transitioned into education, which I really found my place there. Because then I was put in a place where I was inspiring students and I was really sharing my excitement with them. So through that journey with education, as I was growing, so was education was changing. So it used to be that the teacher would just tell the students what she knows, right? Now the teacher is a facilitator, right? So teaching has become a lot more about student-centered, project-based, and so I've become more of a mentor, of a guide. And so what I do is I try to give students questions that they can then explore and solve on their own using 21st century skills, critical thinking, communication, group work, which are all tools that they can actually use outside of the creative field as well in the real world. So I really try to focus a lot on the creative process. And, whenever we have students starting out, they're so excited. They want to show you, look what I did, They really want to reach the end. And, for me as a mentor and as a facilitator, I try to really explain to them that, look, listen, the process is where it all happens. So it's okay. You're going to go through parts where it's going to be like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is not good. I don't know if I want to do this. It's very important that we as educators have a really high sense of empathy, which I think is ingrained in us as educators, but to be able to guide them through that stress. And so I try my best through the years. I figured out what is the creative process because I've gone through it myself, and I've tried to make it very organized. So I tell them, look, I'm not going to grade your end product. I'm only grading your process. And so they have to submit their process. They have to take pictures of them researching, drawing. And the more that you fail, I tell them, the higher your grade is. So the more that I see struggle, the more that I see you crying and sweating and just not knowing what you're doing is really where I want to see you, because that means that you've learned, you've gone through the struggle, and you've grown, as an artist. So yeah, I go through them, and through the creative process, I figured out how to divide it in an organized way. So at the beginning, we have research and concept development, which are integral to any art or really any project in design that you're starting.
Mhm.
So they have to do their research. And then the creative process, I've broken down into three distinct parts. So they have to show me practice. So I keep telling them, if you want to draw a woman, I want to see eyes, nose,
Mhm.
mouth, hair, everything. I want to see pages and pages of practice. I want to see that you've practiced. So again, here, I'm a facilitator. I'm not sitting there telling them, okay, draw this. I'm going to give you a grade for that. No, I'm letting them do and explore on their own, practicing. And then I want to see experimentation. I want to see you try something you haven't tried before. So if your project, if you're really interested about urban nature or natural things, why don't you go to the sea, get some seawater, burn some wood, use the wood to maybe draw using the seawater, the sand. So whatever your concept is, experiment. Sometimes it might work, sometimes it won't, but I still want to see that process. And then revision. Let's take what we practiced. Let's take what we've experimented. Let's put them together. Let's revise. Let's talk about it. And, it evolves that way. So this is pretty much where their grade is. And the final result, and for them, they understand it by the end. They're like, okay, this is my final result. I like it. But wow, look at all the things that I've done
Mhm.
in between. So yeah, I tried with the creative process. And um, sorry, I'm not letting you ask
No,
questions,
no,
but
go ahead. Go
here
ahead.
I was gonna bring up new technologies and how that plays a part in the creative process, because now I know that they did the work, right? And this was a big problem when AI first came out. Like, how do we know if they're just using these technologies or if it's their work? So when they show you proof of their process, you can easily tell, and I encourage them to actually use AI for reference, for lighting, for inspiration. Use it, see what it has to say. Show me that you used it. Reflect on how it was used. Um, but I want to see your work at the end. I want to see that you've done your critical thinking and you've gone through your process, and that's how you came up with the end results. So
There's,
that's a
there's,
little bit about the creative process.
I think there is a lot that I can reflect on, to be honest. And honestly speaking, I'm here to listen to you, and you are bringing a lot of value for all the audience. So please speak more. Don't wait for me to ask, because actually, there is a lot that we can learn from what you are saying. I used to be a biology teacher, and for me, if I ask the students to deliver something, I kind of have an expectation about their outcome. Uh, because there is a kind of procedure, experiment. When it comes to creativity, it's open. How can you teach creativity at the time it's something relevant? It's something that goes with everyone's imagination, everyone's mind, everyone's emotions, maybe. So, do you have any expectations, or you are open for what students deliver at the end?
That's a very good question, and that's something that I've really thought about at the beginning of my journey. There is a kind of a rubric that you can follow at the end, but it's a very kind of generic rubric. So I reflect on my own process of creativity, and I feel that I'm the most creative when I'm the most myself, when
Mhm.
I'm the most happy, when I'm the most relaxed, when I'm the most feeling things deeply on a human level, whether I've gone through pain or sadness. And, this is, we've all read about the healing aspects of art and how all the arts, music, design, art, all different aspects. So you have to be kind of in that space where you're feeling safe and open in order to partake in that. So I always keep that in mind whenever I'm teaching. Yes, I'm very systematic, and my expectations are very high as to what the requirements are of the project and of the level that they should be at, because I really push my students. But at the same time, I try to create a very safe space for them.
Mhm.
And that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of um, There is a philosophy of teaching through relationships, and this was something that I also learned through my master's program at AUD. Is you got a sense of family when you were going to university, and so I try to instill that within the classroom, where we go into discussions. And you have to get into the world of the student and go with them. Okay, so what were you thinking? So what happened? So what could that look like, And through practice, experimentation, and revision, there's always the obvious things. Okay, death, skull. And then you have to explain to them, okay, this is a very overused symbol. What else can death look like, And I work with them a lot with symbolism and how can we say something in different ways. And you take baby steps with them so that they go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I always tell them, you're very lucky because you have a platform to say very important things that are, might change the world. You have a very important task. You are here to change the world. And so that gives them a lot of agency, and it gives them a lot of power to think outside of the box, to be confident, and also to feel safe, that it's okay to do that. We do live in a community and a culture where you can't be as open as other cultures. If I were an educator in the US, would be different than if I'm an educator in this part of the world. So you have to be very mindful and very aware of cultural norms, how people think, and try to push each student as to their own capacity and within their cultural background as well.
I think you highlighted a kind of challenge at some point, but you've been in a very extensive knowledge journey from master's to PhD. At the same time, I think you were in the classroom, maybe applying the theories, testing the hypotheses that you were studying, and that's why you are very aware about what you're doing. Don't you think that, or don't you fear that at some point students will rely on these technologies, including AI and other digital tools, to just jump into the product without having to pass through the process? How can you embrace that idea of you need to be? I know that you described a system where you evaluate the process, but from a personal perspective, don't you fear at some point that the process is going to be something that maybe people will not care about because they can just reach out to the outcome?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. So, again, as being mentor, I
Mm,
have to allow them to be convinced of this, right?
mm,
Otherwise, when I'm not looking, they're going to go do it on their own. So I've started out this semester with a very small project where so I wanted them to realize that they are much more capable than AI, because
mhm.
I've used it for my research and it's driven me crazy sometimes. I try to tell it something and it wants to tell me something else. So I know its capabilities, but they don't, right? So on their own, I want them to figure this out. So I gave them a very simple project, creative project. So find a vintage ad of your favorite brand, so they're very engaged, Hershey's, bar and all these vintage ads. So they find their vintage ad, they're excited, they show it to me. So I'm like, okay, this vintage ad from the 30s, I want you to redesign it to look modern, like it's from today. So again, very engaged. And then we do a critique. So then I'm like, okay, it's time for AI now. I want you to ask AI to do the same thing that you did.
Well,
And watching them was really, really interesting. Miss, but it's giving me this illustration style that I don't really like. Or the colors. Oh, this is weird. This is not doing what I want. And through this process, they've really went through the struggle of trying to communicate with it and then they saw the result that it gave them. And they realized that their work was way better than the AI output. And so then we went through a reflection. So what worked with AI? What did you like that it gave you? What didn't you like that it gave you? So the points where they said, okay, well, I like how it gave me the text arrangement. Great, note that down. So maybe that's a point that you can use to improve your original work. So they took the points that they liked, which were not that many, and then they revised their original work. But after this, forget it. no more AI. Nobody was using it. So here, then you gave them the agency. They figured it out sort of on their own. And they realized that in some places it's a tool that they could use, but they're not ever going to be able to just rely on it 100%. They're convinced. So that's the most important thing.
I love this approach. It's so intelligent and it's so convincing without giving lectures, without bothering students about something that anyway they are going to do. I think it's an invitation. It's an implementation plan for all educators, whether they teach art or something else, to change their teaching. And I think what you are describing here is AI was part of your strategy.
Yeah. So to mitigate the idea of cheating, for me, the two big ones, which I already mentioned, is that you have to switch now from being a person that gives information to student-centered, student-led teaching. You must give them critical questions that they must go out and investigate on their own and come back and tell you what they found, right? So this is a really important one because them having to present and go through that process, they're not just using AI and here we go, we didn't learn anything. They're having to work in a group, to have their part, to talk about what they learned. So that's one thing. The second thing is there should be more of a reliance on the process, which is also something that we can't just say, show me the end product. We don't know who did the end product at the end of the day. So in all areas and all subjects, I think it's important now to rely much more on the process. As I mentioned before, it could be used as a tool to scaffold, to push, to make things better. So, for example, the people who are very low achievers now have a tool that they can become better achievers, right? They will never be like high achievers, but we gave them a little bit of a push because now they have a tool of support, which is really good. And then you'll have the really high achievers that can now really excel. With it being used as a tool, you can give prompts that they can research. You can challenge them to get to know it better. With the arts, using VR and AR and different tools now. They can see and vision their character, let's say, within the space before they actually do the thing. Do they like it? Do they not? Can they change it? At the end of the day, they're still doing the work, but it's a tool, right? It's a tool. It's a scaffolding tool. It's like a little bit of a push. So, and also I always give them the opportunity to reflect on how they used it. You used it. Don't hide that. It's fine. We're all using it now. So let's talk about how you used it, where it helped you, how much did you use it, and where did it not help you? So just giving them some trust and giving them the idea of transparency. Let's talk about this. We're all in this together. It's not something we should be hiding. So, these are just small things.
I describe it as the new education reality that we cannot ignore. It's not optional any longer. And what I see you went through yourself testing this AI, adapting your teaching strategies. And this is why your classes have changed because you already went through this, whether through practice or through your PhD research or through your master's. And I think teachers who might fall behind, they are going to struggle because as we are describing now, students are very quick, fast users. They are tech savvy. They use technology better than us. My next question is honestly about your PhD research, which is around emerging technologies. How much the research helps you in the implementation in the classroom? Because there is always the notion that there is a gap between research, there is a gap between theory, methodology, and application.
I wanted to add one more thing before we move along to the research part, because I think it's also very critical and very important to add to what we were talking about before we move into
Yeah.
the research. Well, it is kind of part of research too, which is there's so much going on in industry,
Mhm.
apart from away from education, that is part of our research. So, for
Mhm.
example, for me as an educator, I can't stay within the walls of the education system.
Mhm.
So I need to go, if I'm teaching animation and film, I need to go out into animation and film studios and see how are they working, what are the tools that they are using, because I think everybody in the outside world is going through this transition too. And we need to start creating, as educators, partnerships with industry, right? I'm faculty in higher education now, so this is very easy for me. My students work, so I can take them to studios. I can take them to places that are industry, and they can see how is it set up? How are people working? Because they are also adapting. So that's a huge tool for us as educators as well, and very important now with teaching to connect with industry. So even with the young kids, yes, we used to take them to trips to the zoo and things like that when they're in grade 1 and grade 2. It's important now also to take them to places that are innovative, that are using new technologies so that they can become familiar and so that the educators can learn about how these tools are being used. Talking about research as well, I think teachers need a lot of support now with professional development as well. Um, Jumping around and dodging
No,
the
no.
question, but
This
but
is
it,
no,
it
no,
is
exactly,
related because
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. This is exactly what I want to hear because if the teacher doesn't have the opportunity to have a kind of further studies or postgraduate studies, how do they adapt? And we are addressing this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking, for me, if I didn't have the opportunity to be pursuing my doctorate in this field, in new technologies and creativity, would I be thinking all these questions? Would I be behaving in this way?
Yeah.
I've always had a growth mindset, but I've also been very lucky to be able to have the opportunity to do this. Whereas, what if, there's a working mom with 3 kids who lives in the suburbs. She doesn't have the proper internet. She doesn't have the proper support. She doesn't have the proper structure to be doing this. How is she going to be able to bring this to the classroom? So, then we get into the conversation of inclusivity, of equity, of fairness. You have schools who have tons of funding, they get the best technology, the best support, and then you have schools that don't have that. So then how is that balance going to happen? So we have to be very conscious of that. And I think it all starts with, even if you don't have the budget, to take time and space to actually support your teachers and using the platforms and using all of these things that schools are trying out now. So it's okay just because we got the latest platform of, I don't know, gaming or whatever, but the teacher doesn't know how to use it. How is that going to help us? So it's critical, I think, before anything else, being able to train teachers on how to use supportive technology, because now technology can also support people with handicaps, people that have different types of learning disabilities. So it's a huge asset that we can be using. But I think it all starts with educating our teachers and supporting them, and making sure that they have what they need to be able to teach. So yeah, I mean, my research is all based around going back to my research. So my university is based in the US. So it's become very easy for anyone with technology now to be able to pursue
Mhm.
professional development, to be able to pursue their studies. And being in the classroom, I'm able to see how things are progressing. It's still very new, so there isn't that much research. So for
Mhm.
me, I'm looking at how are new technologies impacting creativity?
Hmm.
So I'm still at the very beginning of that process of kind of testing out, are they more creative? Is it hindering them? Is it making them rely on it more? Are we becoming more dependent on it? Is it something that's good? How can we regulate it? These are some things that I'm looking at, but it's still in the very early stages. So we will need to be doing another podcast for me to tell you all my findings on that.
Indeed.
And hopefully they are all very positive. But I feel like for me, it will continue being as it is for a while, that it does enhance creativity as long as it's being used as a tool. And, AI at the end of the day is not human. It will never feel. This is something that we can be 100% sure about. AI will never feel. So all the arts are based around human emotion. So it's very important for us as educators in the creative field to look at art history and to look at when AI wasn't here. What were they thinking? How were they studying visual components? How were they studying human emotions? We look at Baroque art, for example. I give this example because it's like it was one of the turning points where art became much more emotional. It was
Hmm.
very moody and black and white, and there was tension, and it was reflective of the time. So, what were the artists thinking? What was behind that? How can we use that same ideology into animation and film today, for example? So, that was a human emotion. That was a human experience that students today need to understand. And it wasn't boring anymore. And then they're like, oh my gosh, now they know Baroque. They know how to
Hmm.
use black and white drama. And at the end of the day, you need to communicate with them in their own language, right? They have their own vocabulary and their own tone, and you have to be on the same level and in your coolness to be able to connect with them. We're talking about the safe space. So then they understand clearly that, there are certain human elements that have been consistent across time and history that will never change. It's important for them to understand that even now you're living in the age of technology, you're still the same person as the person that was painting and hundreds of years ago. So it's very important for us to maintain those connections and for them to understand those human emotions.
So do you think
Yes.
that you can now teach again in a classroom? And I'll give you a challenging question. Going into a classroom and for a reason, there was cut in the electricity. Let's speak
There
maybe about
was?
cut in the no electric current anymore, no
Okay.
Wi-Fi, the devices are not working. So what is your transition plan?
Transition plan? You mean how would I change my teaching
Yeah.
strategies? I function as if it's not there. I told you. So it's a tool. So I really focus on critical thinking a lot, and on communication a lot, and on confidence a lot. Those are my three very big ones. And I'll find ways to create critical thinking. At the end of the day, it's about getting all these different things where they're able to connect the dots and create something new with them. It's about them being able to communicate their ideas. I know, because for me, I struggled with that when I was younger. I was, brought up my early years in Lebanon, and then I had to travel. I was 11 to the US, and it was a totally different culture. So I was very shy. I was like really into sports and things like that. So for me, it's been a process to be able to get that confidence to speak. And I realized how important it was when it came to the arts. You can have the best ideas and not be able to communicate them. And I used to always get really frustrated when there were people in my class who didn't have the best ideas, but they knew how to communicate.
Yeah.
And it was like they got a standing ovation. And here I was, 2 weeks of all-nighters, and I had the best work, but sometimes I didn't know how to communicate it, and I had to learn how to do that. So I don't know. I feel like I'm a coach, coaching a basketball team. Like, I feel I want to give them all the tools to be able to survive in the world before giving them the information, because now the information is so easily accessible. So I want to work on their confidence. I want to work on their critical thinking. I want to feel good about them, that if you throw them anywhere,
Yeah.
they'll stand. It's like having kids. I don't know. It's just, I don't know if all educators are like that. I feel like most are. But it's really about giving them those human tools, and then also the confidence to be able to use new technologies to enhance their work, to enhance their ideas. But it you have to work from the inside as well first.
Interesting. And one last question around the teacher empowerment. And mainly, I'll be speaking about the K-12 sector, who should take care of professional development and upskilling educators. From your point of view, do you think it's kind of the faculty or the system, or it's more governmental part, or it's a personal mission that every educator must pursue?
Yeah, I think it should come at every level, at all the levels that you mentioned. You have to empower the teachers to have the agency to want to do it on their own. And I think here curriculum directors become such a prominent part of the ecosystem, because they bring new pedagogy to the teachers, right? And maybe the curriculum directors empowering the teachers then that are a bit more advanced in the process to mentor the other teachers, because then, um, you know, uh, well, they say they don't have enough time or they don't have
Mm,
enough resources. Well, you can use people as your resources to help
yeah.
each other. I know we have faculty here at the university who are so excited about AI, and you can just, every time they figure out something, you can just see them talking, and then you're like, oh, really? You did that? So you'll always find those personalities within an infrastructure that you can kind of encourage to share what they know, which gets other people excited. So it has to be intrinsic, and then it has to be within your community. It has to be within your institution. Like, you have to have some kind of body or committee or somebody that is able to talk to the higher up people, that we need to have clear policy on what we can accept, what we can't accept, so what we need to do in order to push forward. So, and then budgeting comes, and then plans come into place. But I think it's at every level.
Whoever is watching this session itself, it's a kind of a professional development session. You have mentioned a lot of strategies that can be directly implemented into today's classrooms, and all of that is backed up with practice, with research. And indeed, I'm looking forward to have more discussions with you to follow up with your research around emerging technology, because it's a question that myself, I ask it, how technologies are going to impact creativity, cognitive skills in humans. And again, it's an open-ended question. It's always phases that we are studying. Anything else you would like to share more with our audience? Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed your questions. I would just tell any educator, really, now that we have the opportunity, that delve into it, try it out, try things. That's how we learn. Sometimes we'll fail, sometimes it works. Don't worry about getting it right. It's here. We have to learn how to use it. If you don't, you'll get left behind, and you don't want to be left behind. So have growth mindset and try things, try them out. They might work, they might not. So it's all about learning at this point.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing too much of value, and looking forward for
Thank
more
you.
discussions. Have a great
My
day.
pleasure. Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye bye.